Did you see the trailer for that new Civ game, the sci-fi one out in the future in space?
I did not see the trailer, but I read about it on Kotaku. That's pretty exciting, I guess. Is that like your dream come true?
Yes and no.
I know they burned you before with what was it?
Battlefield?
No, I'm going to sound like an idiot now. Spore? Was that it?
Well, yeah, that's one thing where I didn't feel like it really paid off.
That was also Sid Meier, wasn't it?
No, that's like SimCity.
Who made that?
People, Maxis?
Will Wright?
I don't know.
You're right, it is Maxis, but I'm gonna look it up.
I think if everything is foreign and weird and the architecture is weird, I feel like a lot of people are going to have a hard time really getting on board with it.
Will Wright.
I had a mod or something for one of the SimCity games in the past where it changed all of your architecture to something like sci-fi like, and everything was weird. I didn't know what buildings were. I didn't know what was going on, and
I can't.
Like if I look at like an industrial building or I look at a building that's like derelict, I know exactly what I'm looking at in a SimCity game. But I'm looking at some weird capsule or blobby looking building thing. I don't know what the fuck that is.
I feel like with the Civilization games though, you're never building buildings. You know, it's like I feel like the city builder will just create a city for you.
Yeah.
So I don't think interesting visuals is going to hinder from the game as a whole.
We'll see.
Fingers crossed. I'm excited for the little bit I know.
I'm tentatively excited, but I've seen examples before where they sort of sci-fi things up and it's not quite as enjoyable. Battlefield, 21?
2142?
42. That's an example of one. I mean, I know it's a totally different kind of game, but they took the game and they just threw it into the future. That'll be good. There's lasers and blasty noises. It'll be great.
It'll work. Everybody loves that.
Nope.
Nope. Me neither. Theme song? Theme song go?
Theme song go.
Theme song go.
I really enjoyed the theme song this week.
Did you?
It just played, and I found it really enjoyable.
Oh. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed this week only. You didn't like it previously?
I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. Welcome to Player 2 Press Start, Episode 4. I am killagreg, at killagreg17 on the Twitter.
I'm Dan, at BogroD.
You can find us together as one at Player 2. Spell it for me. I mess it up every time. PLAYRTWO. Confession time. When I recorded that intro alone last week, even looking at it, I messed it up probably 4 or 5 times. I tried to wing it. Didn't work. I looked it up, put the phone down. Didn't work again. Looked at it, didn't work. And then I think maybe the 4th time I got it while looking at it. So, score 1 for efficiency in our Twitter name.
It's we're a little late to the game on that one with that name.
That's okay.
A lot of permutations had already been snatched up.
We need to buy them back. We're gonna get.
We'll be so
rich.
popular, we'll be able to do that someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This week, we are playing Civilization Revolution, which I was stoked about.
I was stoked that it was a free download.
Yeah. This is the game that I've owned since it came out in 2008, which is crazy. Like, it still seems like a recent game.
It did. I will give it credit for that.
You forget how old the now last generation of consoles are. I mean, there's never been a console generation as long as that one. Not even close.
What about the Sega Genesis? Didn't that come out in like 88 or 89?
I can look it up. I'm pretty sure the Genesis 2... let's find out.
While Greg's looking this up, I'm going to take the opportunity to plug our other side project called the Laser Club. So I was on a quest to get my hands on a Laserdisc player so that I could watch the 1997 version of the Star Wars Special Edition, not on VHS because VHS is garbage. So I did eventually get the Laserdisc player and the Star Wars set, but the great part is that the Laserdisc player came with 10 absolutely ridiculous Laserdiscs. For example, it came with Little Women, The Hunt for Red October, this really terrific-looking Michael Douglas movie called Black Rain, Roadhouse. So there's a whole bunch of really awesome movies that we're going to watch and review, and it's going to be a limited-run podcast, and it's going to be great. So stay tuned for that.
Check it out. The Sega Genesis came out in North America in 1989. The Sega Saturn came out in 1994.
All right.
So that was a 5-year lifespan. The 360 came out in 2005, and then the Xbox One just came out the end of last year. So you're looking at about 8 years.
Wow.
So it's kind of ridiculous how long this console generation has lasted. So I played Civilization Revolution right when it came out. I had stolen a copy from Hollywood Video. Don't tell them. They're bankrupt, so they can't sue me now. I don't think. And I loved it. But I've never really played the multiplayer. So playing it with Dan was essentially my first time. I may have dabbled a bit, but I don't have any lasting impression of it.
That was pretty much my first time playing with another human being as well. I typically... Not with this one, but with previous Civ games, I'd always just played the computer and like set up the parameters exactly the way I wanted, and then just played the game that I wanted to play.
So why don't you go through your history with Civilization in general leading up to this?
Well, I think my first game in the series was Civilization 4, and I had that for the PC. And like I said, I would set up the parameters specifically how I wanted to play. Partly, I think, because I was a little confused and overwhelmed by it when I first got the game. I didn't like going to war, and I found it just kind of tedious and time-consuming. And I liked exploring the world, so I tended to turn war off. And one of my favorite game types was in Civ 4. You could create. It was essentially like the new world of North America and South America, and the kind of the old world of Europe, Asia, Africa. You start in the old world, and the point of the map is whoever develops ships first can get across the ocean and start colonies in the new world is probably going to win because they'll have access to all these resources and land that they can develop essentially unhindered, except for the native people, which you can take out so easily, like in real life.
These games have a real hatred of natives.
Yeah. It is called Civilization.
I guess. I know we've dabbled into the racial topic before and didn't end particularly well. But this game, Civilization Revolution specifically I'm talking about here, is pretty racist, right?
It's pretty racist. Well, it's racist in the sense that everything is a stereotype.
Right. I mean, and I guess you have, in order to differentiate the different cultures, you sort of have to take everything to the extreme.
Yeah.
But specifically in dealing with the natives, I feel bad, and to the extent where I definitely feel like they might have been treading on some
thin ice,
inappropriate territory.
Yeah.
They're all, and I don't know, I don't think this is insensitive, they're all super black. And
no, I ran into some barbarians in the north once who were like these big sort of like Viking type people.
Oh, I didn't encounter them at all.
I only encountered them once.
They're mostly super black and exceptionally African.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
And they're pretty much portrayed as idiots.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate too.
And I could be mistaken, but are there any African nations you can be?
I don't think in this one. Could you be the Zulu?
You might be able to be the Zulus.
I think in previous games. We should look up. I've got this right here, so we'll see what nations you could play as.
While you look that up, I'll talk about my Civilization history.
Oh wait, I didn't finish my story real quick. So you get from the old world to the new world, and I would always play as the Spanish because they had boats to begin with. I mean, I totally had rigged the whole thing so that I would win, but I had fun every time. And that was kind of like, that was the way that I was used to playing Civilization, like having detailed control over all the parameters of your game type. And that'll be an important point to remember when Greg and I get into the discussion of Civilization Revolution, because it's a much different experience, and it definitely it colored my appreciation for the game. So just keep that in mind when we get to that. So I'll look this up. Greg, you tell me about your experience with Civilization, the series.
So I played the original Civilization on the computer way back in the day. Well, honestly, it might have been an old game even when I was playing it. I want to say maybe like 1997 or so. And I enjoyed it, but at the same time I was playing Colonization, which is a game that I enjoyed much more. And, you know, just from the way you described your Civilization 4 play, that was what Colonization was. You know, you were just setting up shop in the New World, and then, you know, you would take America through its paces, I guess, and hopefully form a country. And eventually they did release an expansion for Civ 4 that was a Colonization update. I never got a chance to play. That's not what you were playing, right, Dan? You just set up your own.
Yeah, I just played. I just set up custom maps every time. And just in case you're curious, there were 3 expansions for Civilization 4. There was Warlords, Beyond the Sword, and Colonization, which is the one you're talking about, which is based on Sid Meier's 1994 game Colonization.
1994. So yeah, I guess the game was a little bit old even when I was playing it, but my initial Civilization experience was with the originals. Then I played this game in 2008, and because I enjoyed this game so much, I went and purchased Civilization 4 for the PC. But I actually did not like Civilization 4 very much. It was too involved for me. I liked the simplicity of Civ Rev much more than the extreme customization in Civ 4. But I'm curious if I had done the same route you did of Civ 4 then Civ Rev, if I would have had a similar opinion that you wound up with of this game.
Well, you mentioned in previous podcasts there's a website devoted to basically like playing games the way you want to play them, and there's no wrong way to play. And that sort of comes into play here. I wanted to play it a particular way, and I did. And when we got to Civ Revolution, that wasn't an option for me, and I was very frustrated because I had no experience with going to war. And so I had a pretty steep learning curve there with, like, you know, how to heal your units and, you know, keep updated and keep, you know, constantly, like, keeping your cities defended. Like, for example, there was that one time we started – this is hilarious. We started a map, and I didn't defend my city because it was, like – it was the third turn into the game, and I was just exploring the area around me. And there was a barbarian hut, like, you know, a couple of squares away, and I didn't even think twice about it. And I was off fighting some other barbarian hut on the other side, and all of a sudden, my city is sacked by the barbarians. I didn't even know that was a thing they could do.
I didn't even know that was an option. I didn't know that the barbarians could leave their little house.
Yeah. So that ended real quick.
That was crazy. That might be my favorite Civilization moment of all time.
It was like, wait, what just happened?
That when I accidentally nuked the wrong city.
So, do you want me to give a quick list of the nations? There's actually more here than I thought there were.
Why don't you just tell me if there's any African nations?
There are the Zulu.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, Egypt, too, if you want to get technical.
I guess we could get technical. See, yeah, I feel like the natives are portrayed in a very unsavory way.
Yeah.
But I'm not, I mean, typically I'm not the type of person to get up in arms about that kind of thing. But it definitely seemed that it was worthy of note to me.
Yeah.
So why don't we get into our discussion?
Okay.
So like I had said, I played this game. I absolutely love it. I like that you can. Now, granted, it does take a while. There's no way to play this game that it only takes an hour to play.
And actually, speaking of that point, a real big criticism is that if you're playing multiplayer, there's no way to like save your game. You really have to dedicate a chunk of time to playing and hope that you've allotted enough time to actually finish it.
Yeah, Dan and I started probably 4 or 5 games we didn't finish.
Yeah.
Partially because of, BS that was out of our control, and partly because we just simply didn't have time. I mean, we're looking at it. We start a game at 9 o'clock. It's 12:30. We both have to work in the morning. We can't finish it.
Yeah.
And that was just the 2 of us playing. I can't imagine if there was 5 people playing that you would finish a game in less than 5 hours.
Yeah.
That's a big hill to climb.
It is.
I mean, if you wanted to play with friends, how often are you able to get 5 friends online
for like 6 hours?
For like 6 hours. I mean, it's difficult.
Yeah. And if you're not playing, I mean, if you're playing with like, it's a closed map, you're playing with people I don't understand why they can't just do a save state of the current map, and then if you want to pick that game up, you got to have the same people playing, with the same gamer tags and the same everything. Like, why can't they figure out a way to do that?
I mean, I wouldn't put that as a criticism on them. I think that would be too difficult. I don't think there's any way to really pick up a game in the middle with 2 people like that.
Yeah, but it's a turn-based game though.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about programming or game making. I don't know any of that stuff. It
was regardless of whether it's technically feasible or not. It was frustrating that we couldn't find a way to do it.
Right. So, I like this game a lot. I've beaten it probably 100 times. Every different civilization, every different way to beat it. There's 4 ways to win a game of Civ Rev, which I think are the same 4 ways as any civilization. Is that correct?
Probably. They sound
similar. You can win it by domination, which is capturing all of your opponent's capitals. There is economic, which means you have a gold surplus, and this game is 20,000 gold, and then you build the World Bank. There's science, which is
referred to as the technological.
Technological. I have a list right here rather than trying to remember it. Technological, which is you research all the way up to the space age, you build a super rocket ship, and you go to Alpha Centauri, which is the closest solar system?
I think the closest star.
Okay, closest star. And then the last one is culture, which is you get 20 great people, world wonders, or you convert other cities to you, and then you build the United Nations. Those are the 4 ways to win. I've done them all, and realistically, once I set my mind to it in, a single-player game, I never had any trouble achieving that. Maybe it was just, I have more experience. I've done everything enough to know what you have to do to be successful at it. Or maybe the single-player is just easier to do, which I think leads to your main criticism of this game.
Which is that the only real way to win this game in multiplayer is through the domination victory condition. It seems like everybody all the time is threatening you and trying to go to war with you, like the CPU players. Greg and I at one point, actually, we thought we had set it up so that war was not an option, and we played the game for a while, and then it turned out that was not the case, and neither of us were prepared for that. And so once the shit hit the fan on that one, we ended that game real quick. But like, I really enjoy a cultural victory, because stealing somebody else's city because you're so awesome, I just get a real joy out of that. Like, you just keep your boundary of influence, you keep pushing against them, and then it's like, oh yeah, you're ours now. I get such a thrill out of that. Like, you're so awesome, they want to join your country.
It is nice, and
it's really like fulfilling.
Your little flag starts to flash in their city, and just say Dan was trying to take over my city. I keep getting these warnings, be like, hey, you're not generating enough culture. This guy over here is going to take all your stuff. You better get wise. And it sort of leads to this fun panic. You're like, oh no, my people have to get smarter. Throw more plays at them. I think science might be my favorite way to win. I just happen to be really good at the domination winning.
Yeah.
Every game we finished, I wound up winning. Would you say, is that correct?
Yeah.
Partly because honestly, I've just played this game so much. There's a lot of little things you can do that I just don't think, Dan, that you knew about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a very good Civ player.
Right.
I play it the way I want to play it and never played it any other way. And that is not good preparation for playing Civilization Revolution.
And this is the first time that you and I haven't started a game together. Like with Dead Space, we started the game together. We played it all the way through. With 50 Cent, same thing. Halo was a little different. But this is the first time that I've ever played the game extensively, and then you jumped in to also do it.
Yeah.
I think we should avoid that from now on.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, it gives us much different perspectives. I mean, I had experience with the series, just not this game.
I think what would have helped is that what we're talking about now is the multiplayer. It would have been nice if there was a co-op option that you and I... Was there?
There was, but then everybody is at war with us all the time. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yes,
they were
right
constantly
from the get-go,
threatening us.
everybody just hates us.
Yeah.
In most games, for a long time, other civilizations will be like, hey, nice to meet you. You want to trade some science.
Yeah.
And then usually at about 1000 AD, I want to say, everybody just starts hating you. It's like, wait a minute. Screw you. Let's fight.
Yeah, it starts off slow like, hey, give us this technology or we're going to attack you. And then you're just like, no, piss off. And that goes on for a while, and then they eventually do actually attack you.
Right.
Actually, one other kind of minor nitpick, but it kind of makes a big difference in the game, is with the previous Civ, Civ 4 that I played, you could set your explorers, whatever, you could set your like really low-level units to just explore the map continuously. You could set them on autopilot, and they would just walk around the map constantly, like updating, so that your kind of like quote-unquote fog of war was always up to date. And you can't do that in this one. Like, I would have loved to just have like 3 ships just constantly like going around the ocean looking for stuff and exploring the map. And instead of me having to do it manually, like I found that to be a bit of a chore.
You sort of can. It's not nearly what you want it to be, but if you click on a unit and then take your cursor way far out, it'll tell you how many turns it will take to get there, and then you can just set it to go to that point. Yeah,
but that's what I mean. You have to do it manually. I don't mean like move him like. I mean, I realize you could set him to, a spot like 30 turns away. I realize that.
Okay,
but
I want to just be like default explorer.
Yeah, I want to have like 10 units just on default that just are exploring the map, or ships that are just going around the ocean, like just constantly. And that way too, like you sort of have a bit of a network. So if you need a unit in a place, especially with the ships, or you want to pick somebody up because like say you found a great person, you want to pick them up and bring them back to your city. You sort of have a network of units that you can access more quickly.
Yeah, that'd be pretty nice.
Yeah, you can do that in previous games.
This game does get extremely tedious with how much the game tries to streamline itself. The whole point of this game was that, hey, we want to make a civilization for consoles. We know without a mouse and a keyboard,
some of this is going to be tedious.
RTSs, which this is classified as a real-time strategy, but it's loose with that. Without a mouse and a keyboard, these types of games are very hard. So let's simplify everything, make it really accessible so that you can do it with a computer. And that works with a lot of it. The right bumpers will just toggle from one city to the next. You mean
do it with a console?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say?
Do it with a computer.
Yeah. Do it with a console. But at the same time, it makes micromanaging so difficult. Because towards the end of the game, you'll have some cities that are producing units every turn. And you just can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
You just wind up, wailing on defend because it's just easier than figuring out what you actually want to do with that tank you just made.
Yeah.
So by the end of the game, it becomes just almost too much. There's so much going on, you can't keep track of it all.
Especially if you've got, 10 large cities producing lots of, stuff and resources and people and units and all that stuff. It's, you're hopping from city to city to city. And especially with us, if we're on like a 30-second timer, so you can't even get through everything before your turn's up.
Right. And a lot of times, I won't have anything to do on a turn, so I'll just end my turn, which then starts a timer for Dan. And you can change the timer.
No, that's true.
Your options are no timer, which is, indefinite turns. Then you have 120 seconds, 60 seconds, and 30 seconds. But there was a lot of time when I'm done, I click my timer starts for Dan. He's got 15 cities to manage, and now he's got 30 seconds to do it all. And it becomes very frustrating. Like, you get angry at the other person. They're angry because now they have to wait 30 seconds for you.
Yeah.
It's too much.
It's the pros and cons of a turn-based game, but
I guess so.
It's nice. It's one of the nice things when you play it by yourself because everybody else does their stuff like and it's your turn again.
Right, the computer's doing everything it has to do.
Yeah.
While you're doing it.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for them, which is nice. But I don't. The timer is a necessary evil. We're playing 4-hour games with a 30-second timer.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if there was no timer that you would ever finish a game.
Well, we did it once, and I'm pretty sure we didn't finish that one. We did play without the timer.
Oh, did we?
On occasion, but we didn't finish those.
I didn't even remember that. So let's sort of walk through some of our games. We touched on this earlier. The first game we did was we were on a team.
Mm-hmm.
Against.
So I could see your area.
Right.
And you could see mine.
But. So that's what we wanted. We wanted a co-op experience. We're teaming up against everybody else, I guess. But as you said, they were just from the get-go harassing us.
Yeah.
And we couldn't keep up. I think we lost that game almost immediately, didn't we? The first time.
I don't remember.
I think we did. It's okay. The second time, we got a little bit further, but we still wound up losing to domination. They just killed us. The biggest issue with that is that even though Dan and I were on a team, the only thing that enabled was that if we sort of walked through each other's territories, it wouldn't start a war.
Yeah.
We couldn't trade resources. We couldn't trade knowledge. We couldn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, you couldn't. Didn't that commit later on? We just agreed not to attack each other.
Right.
That's when we could trade.
Yeah.
Not like tech and stuff like that and skills.
So, after we tried the 2 verses, which didn't go very well. We did, free for all, which was me versus everybody, Dan versus everybody, everybody versus us, and we just had a gentleman's agreement not to attack each other.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, we could trade and stuff. But it also made it... If I wanted to walk through your territory, we could... It made it difficult. Like, I would mess up your cities and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just wish there was some option that was... How do they not think that this is something people would want to do? To just be a team.
Yeah, or we're both representing one country. That could have been an option.
Oh, yeah, that would have been great.
Or under one, general flag.
Right, we're both United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And, we start out with 2 cities, and every country that we're playing with starts out with 2 cities.
Yeah, I mean, you can make it fair so that everybody's on the same level, but, it's like we were never really on the same team.
And that was our longest game. That was the one where all Dan wanted to do was win a non-domination victory. And it just became impossible. I was trying to win an economic victory.
That may have been your goal for a long time, but you basically took out everyone else through domination. And then it was you and me.
Inadvertently.
Semi-inadvertently.
I didn't mean to. Because I was getting gold so quickly, they gave me a tank army.
Yeah.
Which I got way before anybody else was even close to that level of technology. Mm-hmm. People were still riding around on horses.
Yeah.
And I'm rolling in with tanks. And mostly because I was just bored. Economic victory is really, really boring. All you do is just wait for your cities to get gold, and you can change a few things, but I mean, it's just micromanaging. It's like, all right, this city needs to do this to get more gold. This city needs to do this to get more gold. So I had this tank army. I got bored. I'm like, well, there's this town over here. I might as well go take that town. Well, flash forward an hour. I've taken over every town except for 2 because they were on an island.
You couldn't land on it, and
right. So at that point, Dan was still trying to get this cultural victory. I think at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm just stalling.
Basically,
I could have won at any point. But I would have had to take over Dan's cities, which we agreed not to do.
But like the whole reason that this sort of fell apart for me is because you sort of inadvertently did the domination, took over all these cities, and I wasn't going to go to war with anybody really. So I had my cities, which were doing really well, but I didn't have a lot of them. Like, I was still relatively small, and it got to the point where it was like, I was probably like 1/3 and you were like 2/3 of the map. Yeah. Or maybe 1/4 to 3/4.
That's probably more accurate.
And so just the volume of resources and, that you're, producing, I just couldn't keep up. And so you eventually made it to Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, so then I didn't even win through domination.
Was that the Alpha Centauri one?
Yeah. I eventually won the technological victory. Just because I had so many resources, I just built some rockets and won. Yeah. Which also in that game was also my favorite moment, where I built a nuclear missile and was trying to shoot it at Japan.
And you shot it at me.
And I accidentally blew up one of Dan's cities. He's like, Greg, why did you blow up my city? I said, I didn't. I blew up Japan's city. No, that was mine.
Yeah, no, there were 2 little islands right next to each other. I had a big city on one of them. Japan had a big city on the other. And Greg accidentally blew up mine instead of Japan's.
Their colors were very similar, and they were right next to each other. How was I supposed to know? I suppose I could have looked.
You could have looked.
That was a mistake. I think you think I did it on purpose. I didn't. That was one where I was India. So this is a bit of an aside, but I really enjoyed this. Apparently in the original civilization, India has an aggressive rating of 0. Is that correct? Do you know the story?
I know what you're getting at, but I don't know the specifics enough to tell the story.
I'm going to generalize and tell the story and pretend I'm right. So apparently India has an aggression rating of 0. Once India gets to the modern age, its aggressive stat goes below 0, which the original civilization couldn't figure out. So apparently India gets incredibly nuke happy. They build the nuke and they just shoot it off at everything, which I find hysterical. So in that one in particular, all I wanted to do was get India and build a nuke.
Which is what you did.
Apparently they do that in every one now, though. Every civilization, in honor of that first civilization, they purposely set India to get to a certain point and then just go crazy with nukes. That's fun.
Yeah.
That's real fun.
Unless you're playing against India.
That's right. You got to take them out quick.
Yep.
That'll learn them. So after that, we attempted a few other type of game types. We chose to do...
I think the most notable one is the one we mentioned, where we thought we had set it up where there would be no war, and we could just... we could trade with people or not trade with them, but like we were relatively safe. And, you could go for a technological, a cultural, or an economic win, and then found out probably what would have been 1/3 of the way through that whole game. That was not the case when somebody went to war with us.
It wasn't even that we thought we set up so there was no war. That was the game that we chose 1-on-1. It was I thought it was just going to be Dan versus me.
Oh yeah, and then I was like, "Oh, Greg, what country are you?" And he's like, he mentioned something. And I was like, oh, I just met Japan or somebody else. I just met the British.
Like, oh, I guess we're not alone then.
Yeah, and then it was like, oh, well, let's see if they attack us or not. Yep, they did.
They did, eventually. And at first they were nice.
Yeah.
So
that's what we thought, like maybe...
Even exceptionally nice compared to the other games.
Yeah, so we thought, all right, maybe this will work out.
No.
Nope.
Not at all.
Nope.
So those were the main games we played, and we played a couple ones of each kind.
Yeah.
I feel like
as we went on, I started to get a little bit better. I still am not that great with managing armies. I mean, I was getting better at it, but it just seems tedious to me. Like, I like investing in culture and taking over cities that way, or, the science or the cultural victories are the one that I find most interesting.
I wish... Actually, I'm going to get to this point towards the end. We've been over it, but what was your general impression of this game?
I think it's competent. At times, it is a lot of fun. At other times, I found it limiting, and that frustrated me. If I had come into this game not knowing anything about Civilization, I probably would have been fine with it, and just like, oh, that's what this game is like, not knowing how it could be different. So having some familiarity with the series previously sort of colored my opinion of it. And I understand that they're sort of intentionally limiting the game for consoles, but the stuff that they, like, some of the parameters that you could set up for the game type, like, you don't need to limit that for a console. They could have easily just had a selection, like an options screen, where you pick 10 different things, you can't, there's no economic victory. You can't do that. Or there's no war. There's like all these things. You don't need to have a keyboard and a mouse for that. So I understand in some sense how what they did made sense, and in other areas it just seemed like they just took stuff out just for the sake of taking it out and didn't need to be taken out. So I enjoyed the game. It is what it is. It's a for lack of a better term, it's a dumbed down version of Civ, and that's fine. I would bet that the game. There's a very loud truck outside. I would bet that this game is a little more accessible, maybe for younger people. Maybe I'm underestimating younger players, and maybe they do appreciate more complicated games. But I feel I could see like a 7-year-old playing this and having a great time, and learning a little bit about history, a little bit about anthropology, a little bit about politics, things like that. I could see like that educational component, teaching them something, and then also the game itself being fun.
What did you think about the overall presentation? Some people, I really like the way this game looks. A lot of people criticized it for that.
I think everything could have been a little bit less cartoony and a little bit more refined and detailed. Like, the world was kind of small. The characters were all kind of cartoony. But I mean, I guess it's a game that came out in 2008. I guess I have to be fair. I mean, that's a while ago.
I don't think I like the way this game looks. I like the cartoony elements of it. I like that it's big, bold sprites. You can tell what's going on all the time. When I was playing Civ 4 on the computer, they sort of lump everything together, so it's hard to see what's what.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm just complaining to complain. It's like I said, it's a competent game. I don't really have too many complaints. I really, the only thing I would have wanted would have been an ability to save a multiplayer game so you could keep playing with your friends later, and more detailed options for setting up your game types.
So basically,
also setting up in Civ 4, you could, like, I mentioned there was that specific game type that I did, but different game types that have different types of maps. Like, there's an archipelago where almost everything is just little islands, and so that kind of limits. In the one sense, you can build a lot of little cities, but your expansion is kind of limited because you can't expand on land territory because there's so many small islands. Like, that's fun. Being able to sort of pick your map or pick your game type. I would have liked to have some more options in that sense. It was pretty much like, all right, here's a randomly generated map. Here's a bunch of random nations you have to fight. Good luck. Like, there's no ability to really customize it.
So, as a whole, given what you're given, you enjoyed yourself. Is that correct? Is that a good way to boil it down? It's like, I would have liked all these stuff, but since I didn't have it, this is fine.
Yeah, I would probably give the game like a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
I was relatively happy. I was a little frustrated at moments where, like, I clearly effed up and didn't realize it, and it was too late to go back and fix it. And it's like, these are long games. You invest a lot of time in them, and it's like, ugh, all right, well,
Right.
that sucks.
Sometimes you'll invest a lot of resources and time into one thing, and then it'll get destroyed, or that city will be taken.
Yeah, that's super frustrating.
You know, at one point I built a tank army. It cost a lot of resources, cost a lot of time. I rolled it into a city. There's still a random element to this. Just because your tank has better stats doesn't mean it's going to win.
No, it could get destroyed by, like, an archer.
Right.
And that's ridiculous, but it can happen.
It can happen. So there have been times when you'll lose a great city or something, and that can be very frustrating.
I think maybe something that would have helped me learn the specifics of Civ Revolution a little bit better would have been if the constantly popping up, cartoon caricature people, if they were actually helpful instead of just like telling me stuff that is obvious or unhelpful. Like if they were like, oh, this city is not really that well defended. Like I don't remember ever seeing notifications about like a city like not being defended well,
no,
or like if it was like you're Thermopolis, you've only got one unit of archers there, and you should probably build some tanks, something like that, or like you need to update your army because this is a weak point. Like that kind of guidance would have been super helpful.
That would have been exceptionally helpful. And while we're on the topic of those advisors, they might be my least favorite part of this game. In general, they are completely unhelpful. The only time they will ever give you any advice is if your city is about to be taken over by culture.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Not, hey, there's a bunch of armies outside here, better go check on that city.
Yeah.
It's just that, just the culture warning. And when they pop up, they speak a sort of Simlish, and it's awful. They just make these horrible squawking noises coming out of them.
Yes.
When I had first played this game, I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and she wouldn't let me play it with either the sound on or while she was home. Like she would be in a different room doing something, and it was just this constant squawking. And she would come in and be like, "You have to turn it off or turn it down. I don't care which one." It's awful, and the sound in general in this game is real bad. There's this sort of it's poorly edited. It's always way too loud. Everything is too loud in this game, and you can turn it down, but the default is screaming.
Kind of, yeah.
And there's only like 2 songs. There's the theme song and the You've Done Something Triumphant song.
Yeah, which is funny because I actually have a ton of music in my iTunes, which I just pulled right out of the Civilization 4 programs.
Oh, really?
Program file folders, because they had like the whole soundtrack for the game as MP3s. So every era had its own music, and there were 10 to 15 songs per era. So I had like a ton of music, like classical music and other stuff that I was able to like toss into my iTunes from the game. This doesn't have that. This does not have a compelling soundtrack.
It's awful. It's just sound effects and those 2 songs.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, this game feels very lonely. And when you're playing alone, obviously you are alone. That's fine. But there was extensive periods of time where Dan and I didn't say anything to each other.
Yeah.
There's no music playing.
Yeah, we're just going through the chores of maintaining our cities.
Right. So it's just barren if you feel lonely.
Yeah.
But not in a good way, not in like a Fez sort of way.
No.
In an awful game sort of way.
Yeah.
So I mean, just presentation wise, I like the visuals. I hate the sound, and I hate those people. Those stupid advisors.
Yeah, or when the other there should be an option where if you're never going to give another country what they want no matter what, and you're willing to go to war, you should be able to just set that to auto so the people stop popping up.
Just set it to auto finger and be done with
exactly. Like it interrupts what you're doing, and you got to deal with it and select the same. Like there was maybe like one time out of 50 times those things popped up where I actually paid the person off.
Yeah.
I just out of principle I'm not going to do it. I'd rather lose the game.
And these advisors must be triggered by certain events, because a lot of times throughout the game they'll stack on top of each other. So it's just one pushing another. Literally, that's the animation of one pushing another one out of the way.
Yeah.
And you're like wailing on B just to get them all out of the way because you know they're not saying anything useful. It's just BS. You just want it to be over with. Just get out of my way.
Yeah.
They're awful. I wish you could turn them off, and I don't think you can. Even the other countries have awful, like, leader animation that pop up and squawk at you. I can't.
Like, just to sort of comment a little bit more on how the advisors could have been helpful. Like, it was a while before, and you know, I was rusty with Civilization. I played Civilization 4 came out in 2005. I played it for maybe 2 years, and then, you know, probably set it aside and didn't really touch the series after that. So I was pretty rusty on it. But like, whether your city is producing science or gold, or, you know, you can have a mix of the two, right? Or is it just one or the other?
One or the other.
Okay, I feel like maybe in previous ones you could change like the levels.
Oh, there is a custom setting, and you can set it so some do science, some do gold.
But it's kind of complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah,
it's pretty much science to gold.
I think I fussed with it a few times, but like that would have been a good. Like, if I'm going for a technological victory, and all of my cities are producing gold, like that's not smart. Wouldn't I want them to be producing science?
Yeah, I think I have 2 points to make about this. I think the idea is that you're supposed to settle cities with a theme in mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that, you know, half your cities are producing gold, half your cities are producing science, or, you know, a little bit of gold and mostly science or whatever. But they're pretty bad about signifying where a good starting city is, or where a good place to put a city is.
Yeah, like I picked some stuff up, you know, as we played. Like, if there's a little hill spot, that's a good place. Things like that. I felt like advisors that adapted to the conditions of the game and what you had already selected, like the path you were clearly headed towards. That's something that game programmers can do.
It shouldn't be hard for them to adjust those kind of settings.
Like, if it looks like I'm going for one victory type, the game can tell that, or it can ask me, like, or it can just flat out ask me, what victory type are you going for?
Right, and you can change if you need to.
Yeah, and you can change it, and then so they can give me suggestions and hints to further that, you know, that victory type, the one you're aiming for, to tell you, hey, this city's producing a lot of gold, but it could also produce a lot of science. You should switch this.
Right.
You know, is there something, like, I needed to, like, ask me questions at certain times to sort of guide me in the right direction as a new player. And, like, you can give me the option to turn all that off if I don't want it.
Right.
You know, but, like, that kind of help would have made the whole experience much easier and more enjoyable, and helped me from making stupid mistakes that I didn't realize I was making.
And I don't think this is too much to ask out of this game.
Yeah.
I think they took that out for simplicity's sake, to the game's detriment.
This feels like a game where you should have that, whereas, like, Civilization 4, I feel like, because it's, like, a denser game,
that's true.
I mean, you can have it if you want, but I feel like that's a game where, like, you really want to get into it. You really don't even necessarily need that kind of help. But this is, like, a more simplistic version. I want hand-holding.
Right. People who are playing Civ 4 can go and get a game FAQ, you know, while they're playing if they need to.
Yeah.
People who are playing this on the console, they're not really going to go do that. They're not going to go hunting. They need to have their handheld in that way.
Yeah.
Don't take things out to make it simpler. Help us out more to make it simpler.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We didn't make the game.
That's true.
We should make games.
That's a terrible idea.
That is a terrible idea. It's like starting a bar or opening a bar.
Yeah.
So, do you have any other final overall impressions?
No, I mean, those cover my general complaints. I mean, like I said, ultimately, I had a good time. 7 out of 10, I think, is a worthy score. It has its flaws. It's a fine game. It's competent. The complaints are largely nitpicky and have to do with my own inability to comprehend all of the components of this game, like, from the get-go. So, I mean, it's partially my own fault, but the game could have sort of guided me a little bit more than it did.
I have a theory about games now that there are very few incompetent games. The difference between a good game and a bad game nowadays are the nitpicky things. And, you know, maybe we're spoiled video gamers, but if they fixed these few things that we are nitpicking about, this is a competent game. They don't make incompetent games because they would never get out the door. If they fix those few nitpicky things, that takes this game from a 7 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10.
That's true.
And we're talking, a few little changes they could have done, and that's what we're talking about now.
And actually, I think I would agree with you on that, because if you go back to our Dead Space review, a lot of our complaints are relatively nitpicky. Like, the bulk of the mechanics of the game we were fine with.
Right.
And visually the game
was stunning.
It was great. It was mainly nitpicky things that really dragged the game down for us.
Right. Take, for example, Call of Duty, which, great-looking game, a million people play it, totally competent gameplay, just not what I want. I want Battlefield. I want, one little change, bigger maps. That's essentially it. But Call of Duty, I would, give an 8 out of 10. Battlefield, I give a 9.5 out of 10. Bigger maps. That's almost it. So at this point with video games, every absolute little detail is what makes a huge difference in a game. So I think in your defense, these nitpicks, that's all that matters. So don't give things to this game that it doesn't deserve because you think you're being nitpicky.
All right. Well, this game can go F itself. It's a piece of garbage.
2 out of 10.
2 out of 10. 1.5 out of 10.
My general impressions of this game, I like this game a lot. I didn't have a tremendous time playing with you, which sounds accusatory. Part of it is I think the multiplayer is just poor. I don't think it has...
That, and I'm a very stubborn player.
That, and you're a stubborn player. I definitely felt bad when I was winning because I knew I was going to win.
Yeah.
And that you weren't going to win. I felt bad about that.
You shouldn't. It was my own fault. But, I was being stubborn about things that should have been in the game. You should have been able, at the very least, to turn off war. For exactly situations like this, where somebody is not very good at running an army.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack.
No, this is it. This is what we're talking about.
But if you're playing with somebody that's never played the game before, there's a lot to this game to manage, and being able to turn off certain features would have been helpful.
Yeah,
or it would have helped ease somebody into the game.
There is no learning curve with this game. It's just a flat line. You either get it or you don't.
Yeah.
There was no easy setting. We couldn't set the computer players to easy so they didn't F us up all the time.
Or another option would have been no war until 1500 AD.
Right, that would have been
or
great.
Something like that.
So because you didn't play the single player at all, you never had any chance at all to ease yourself into the game. Your only option, if you wanted to just play multiplayer, was just lose until you got it. Yeah, that's not fun. Nobody ever has a good time doing that.
Yeah, it wasn't amazing.
So, single player, I recommend this game wholeheartedly. And I know that's not the point of this podcast, but I have to put it out there. I think this game is a 9 out of 10. I think it's awesome single player.
I think that's fine to point out. I mean, this podcast is focused on co-op play. That's what we did. But that's not the strongest part of this game, and I think it's fine to make that recommendation.
Multiplayer, I give this game a 5 out of 10. Maybe even a 4.5 out of 10.
Do you think I'm being too easy on the game?
I think you are being too easy on the game. There was simply no way for us to have the fun we wanted to have. Look at Halo. Halo is 100% customizable. At this point, you can even go into the Forge and put any gun you want in the map. You can do whatever you want.
Do you remember when we set up those custom game types where we were invisible on a giant map with sniper rifles
and no radar?
It was like what was it? It was like rocket launchers and sniper rifles.
Yeah,
and we were invisible. But you could, and
we're talking 45-minute games with 2 kills.
Yeah. Couldn't we? I don't. Do we have the option of permanently invisible and also only only if you're not moving?
Yes, exactly.
So, I mean, the fact that we could set up such an absurd game type, that shouldn't be something you should do. But it is, and it was. I mean, it's not something I want to do every time. I don't want to play that every time I play Halo. But those were some tense games.
It was real tense and a lot of fun.
Because it's like a whole lot of nothing's going on, and then shit got real quick.
I think this game needed any amount of customization.
Yeah.
Any amount.
Yeah.
You couldn't even pick what countries your opponents were going to be.
Yeah.
Where is literally any option?
Is any of that in the single player?
I don't know. It's been too long since I've
No, that's
done
fine. But like all of that stuff was in all of the stuff that we were complaining about was largely in Civilization 4.
Let me pose. I have two questions to end the podcast with. The first one is: do you think that this was just tacked on?
The multiplayer?
Yeah. Is that the reason why it's so shallow?
Well, that kind of gets into my question of, and it's okay that you can't answer it, but that gets into my question of, was any of that customization available in the single player? And if it was, then I would say that the multi is largely tacked on, and they were just unwilling to kind of work those options into it. If it's a relatively similar experience on either end, then I'd say that's just the way the game is.
Because these were the same people who made Civ 4. So obviously these thoughts crossed their mind before. Why would they not do it now? It was the only two options are that they oversimplified it to a detriment, or they didn't put they were like, oh, multiplayer is really big right now. We should probably do that. I think it's maybe both.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, we could speculate all day, and who knows? Maybe the budget didn't allow it, or they ran out of time, or they had other issues, and they didn't have enough time to spend on this issue. It's hard to say what the internal development issues were, and maybe they don't even see it that way. Maybe they see it as like, we didn't include it for reason X, and we're fine with that. We look at these as oversights and mistakes and things they should have done differently. But for all we know, the developers looked at it as, these are positives. This is a good thing.
Right. Maybe there are people out there who like how simplified it is. So this leads me to my second question. And we're not experts in this genre.
Mm-mm.
But with our knowledge, would you say that it is possible to make a good, interesting real-time strategy game on a console? The other main...
Are you thinking of Halo Wars?
Yeah, I've played console real-time strategy games. I got really into Command and Conquer for the Sega Saturn when I was, in 1997 or whatever. I've played real-time strategy games on consoles before. So do you think... I'll edit this a little bit.
I have largely played them on PCs in the past. This one and the Halo Wars might be the first ones I've played on a console. Halo Wars, if that wasn't a Halo game, that would be the most boring game. It's such a dull RTS. But I think the various points that we raise here, if those things had been included in this game, it would have been much better. Like you said, the difference between a 5 out of 10 and an 8 out of 10. I think it's easy to make a fine real-time strategy game. These are the nuts and bolts. You put it together. There you go. To make a great one, I think you need to put a little bit more thought into it, a little bit more careful attention and consideration. And I think on a console, there's sort of always this view of, well, we can't make it too complicated because they only have a controller. And, maybe there's some validity to that, viewpoint, but this is a game that could have been more complex and would have benefited for it.
I'm surprised that people haven't tried it, because you can plug in a keyboard to an Xbox 360. I'm surprised that nobody has ever utilized that in a game.
Yeah.
At all.
Or make some sort of ridiculous, accessory.
Yeah, right?
You could package it in somehow so you've got, shortcuts to all kinds of different stuff.
They have the keypad that you clip onto the bottom of your controller.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's something they can do.
They made an iOS version of this game.
that strikes me as impossible to
That
play.
strikes me as impossible, too. There's a demo. Maybe I'll try it. It just came out. No, it didn't. Multiplayer just got added to it. Time to break out that iPhone, Dan. Do we have anything else to say about this game?
No, I think we've beaten the crap out of this one
Yeah,
enough.
I was very excited to play this, and over the course of our games, it sort of took the wind out of my sails.
I think I might have been partially responsible for that, for my stubborn gameplay. If I was like balls to the wall, like let's go to war, I think you probably would have had a little bit more fun.
Maybe.
But you know what? I'm entitled to want to play the game the way I want to play it.
I actually don't know if that's true, though. Because of the random element of this game, if you and I were at war, I think it would have led to a lot of hurt feelings, like one way or another. You know, like one of us would have gotten butthurt over it. It's like my army was 10 times the size of yours, and I still lost. We would have had trouble with that.
I guess we'll never know.
When we're playing Halo, it is skill. You shot me because you got there before me. It wasn't like your gun had a random element of misfiring.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you had been more war-centric, if it would have made a better experience for this game. You might have lasted a little longer and had a better shot, but I don't think you and I fighting in the game would have ended. It would have ended our friendship, but it wouldn't have ended any better in the game.
I don't think a one console game is going to come between over 10 years of friendship.
I barely like you, Dan.
Ah.
So,
well, you can go fuck yourself.
So next week, Dan and I will be playing the new Mario Kart for the Wii U, our first Wii U game, and probably our only Wii U game because they're all awful. I've had the Wii U since the day it came out. This will be the second game I bought for it.
What's the first?
Interestingly enough, it is the Sonic Kart game, Sonic All-Star Racing, which is great. Maybe we'll play that as a little side too.
Sure,
it's real good. And then, as a part of that celebration of Mario Kart coming out, we will also be playing some older games too, and incorporate that into next week's podcast. We'll be doing Mario Kart, the original Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo, Mario Kart 64, Mario Kart Double Dash, which everybody loves and I don't like so much. Maybe that'll change. And
Mario Kart for the Nintendo DS.
Yes. And then we'll compare the new one to the old one. The new one's getting really good reviews, so I'm pretty excited about it.
It's generally a pretty amazing series.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's a fun series. So I'm looking forward to it.
I am too.
I'm also really like. There's not a lot of game series that I think would apply to our podcast that cover such a range in time and consoles. So I think this will be definitely a unique opportunity for us. And I'm really looking forward to it.
That's true. Do you know off the top of your head, is there any Mario Kart? Is there any system that has more than one Mario Kart for it? I don't believe there is.
I don't know.
That's interesting. We'll discuss later.
Sure.
At killagreg17.
At BogroD. That's on Twitter.
PLAYRTWO at Player2. Player2pressstart.com. And find us on Facebook.
Thank you for listening.
Have a good night.